What is this? Is this like a framework like AutoGen that Microsoft released, LangChain, Llama Index? And it's a bit of all of it. What they're going for here is an entire low-level system where you can run the models from Llama. They have the ability to do multi-step reasoning, which is of course that agentic flavor, and then built in is this tool search and code interpreter. So no longer do you have to add in a function that says, "Hey, do search or do code interpreter." It's built into the model itself. And then this idea that it can learn how to use tools. If you just provide it some type of definition of the tool, it's probably going to be some JSON schema. You could write functions as well, like in Python, and feed it to the model. Another thing they're really focusing on is safety. So this idea of Llama Guard, they explain this a little bit later in the README, and it's this idea of when you're configuring the entire system. We're moving away from one configuring an agent at a time, but you're like configuring the entire system and putting in safety checks at that level. So this is blocking people requesting really nefarious actions and like telling the model, hey, teach me how to do this really terrible thing. I don't know. I don't have fun like trying to jailbreak models. That's not something I think is a good use of your time, but some people like to hammer the models with a lot of those questions. So having this at the top level makes it easier. Let's say if you're hosting a service somewhere for your client and they're saying, how do I make sure this stuff is like safe? I don't want people entering a bunch of weird things. You can basically do that configuration here and not have to retrain the model or fine tune it to do that work. But let's back up a little bit and talk about the ability here. They're releasing, I'm sure the CLI has been around. This is the first time I'm seeing it, to be honest. And this Llama CLI, where you're going to be able to download the models directly. So you'll be able to download the model to whatever hardware you're using, just using the CLI, which is really convenient. It seems like they depend on Hugging Face to do it, but that's not a problem. I'm sure a lot of people are used to, and they're gonna work on configuring the inference server. So instead of writing your own server, doing all that work, setting up the box, having it pre-set up for you with this YAML file, it seems is gonna shorten the amount of time it takes to get all of that stuff set up. It can be pretty confusing, and all of the models have a different little flavor of how they want to get set up. And then another convenience command is gonna be this inference start, where you're gonna be able to then just use it on localhost. So for people who are like, this, am I too late? Did I get in at the right time? No, RFC 0001. If you don't know what RFC means, it's request for comments. It's how a lot of the early internet was built. People literally in forums like talking back and forth about standards. And that's what this is here. As they're building out the Llama stack, which is pretty much their agentic framework, they're talking about what are the standards we want to implement. And this is as of 6 hours ago, so it's so early. And shout out to this guy Josh Karp here. He's already on it. Like he has a diagram. He's talking about observability. So if you want to get in on the conversation, it is early. You're gonna have your ability to put in your input on where you want the Llama stack to go. And I'm excited to see where they take this because this is the first time I've seen a agentic framework not really focus on the low code, no code aspect of it. They just released a product. The AI is a product, go use that. But this is more at a lower level where I think they're going for the bigger infrastructure play, like using this across a lot of machines, across a lot of compute. The way you can tell that is because when you're installing this, you actually might have a dependency on something called bubble wrap. So that's how they're going to run that code interpreter. And bubble wrap is a really low level Linux tool. I haven't used it ever, but I know for sure like people who are in this world using it for sandboxing. So they're going for this type of developer in terms of the Llama stack. So it's going to be really powerful at a low level, which allows them to do a lot more cost performance when they're operating across multiple machines. So this is exciting stuff. I think I will dive into it over the next couple of days. I don't know if I'm going to set up a demo or anything because those models are just so heavy, take a lot of work. I'm going to wait for them to come across the providers, but if you are experimenting with it, maybe you've already set it up, let me know how it's gone for you. And I will put all the links to the things I've covered here in the description. So for now, you can go on the homepage and you can see what they're aiming for. There's a little video here, if I make that bigger, where you're going to be able to, essentially you can mimic what you'll be able to do in Meta AI. You can do it right in your local host as well. What are takeaways from this? It's really great that open source has essentially caught up, completely caught up to where the frontier models are. Now, can it keep pace is going to be the question. And then also, how easy is it going to be to set up all this stuff? Already, open source brings another level of engineering. You have to pay attention to it, you need to maintain it. But I can see that there are going to be definitely some players who are like, we wanted our own frontier model a long time ago, and this is just going to make it really easy for us to take a frontier model and customize it to our needs, because it's going to be essentially the cost is zero here to get a 400 billion parameter model that you don't have to train yourself. Looking at the comparison across the frontier models, again, it's so close. It's 1 or 2 points off. So if you're looking for a free alternative and you can host it and then fine tune it for your specific use case, it's pretty big. I can see a lot of startups getting a pretty good edge on this if they really hone in on their use case, hone in on the customer vertical that they're focused on, and then using these frontier models is going to be pretty big for them. So that's pretty great. And again, pricing is really good across the 8B. Once you get up to the 405B, it gets pricier. So it's definitely not at GPT-4o mini levels. It's going to be pretty expensive compared to this 8 billion parameter version. But again, it depends on your workloads. You're going to have to really benchmark and make sure that you understand what you're doing. I'm excited about the AWS version here. If you watch any videos on this channel, I use pretty much AWS for everything. And this is coming to Amazon Bedrock in a few regions. I'm going to use it through that. They're also working with Grok as well. And you'll see what they're offering with this 405 billion parameter is a couple things. Like you get RAG out of the box. And by the way, Meta's the one who came up with RAG. So if anyone's going to do it correctly, it's going to be these guys. There's also dispatch inference. Everyone's doing real-time inference. And they're pushing on this idea of like safety and data generation. And that's a really interesting take from this perspective that they're calling it out, that they're really focusing in on that. Of course, there's the benchmarks, and across the board, it's mostly improvements. I think for me, I'm always interested in the coding benchmark, so we'll take a look at that. In terms of the comparison between Llama 3, let's say Llama 370B and Llama 3.1, there's considerable improvement in coding capability. So it's going to be interesting to see what people come up with and what they talk about when the code stuff comes out. So let's compare to 3.5 Sonnet on the coding side too. So 3.5 Sonnet, I think like most people know already, it's pretty much up there for coding. And I have not looked back from using it. Even using the Claude and the regular chatbot is really good too. So I'm not surprised that it's still dominating that space. But again, the point of 405B is you can customize it, fine tune it, and take it to whatever place you want in terms of your vertical and what you're doing in your industry. So that's the main takeaway here. And it's near state of the art quality. It's near state of the art quality. So you can get a state of the art quality model basically for free as long as you could download it, host it, and also deal with the storage and compute cost. All right, you can look at this site I found here, and I'll put it in the description, and it gives you like a high overview of where you can get the best cost model, the best performance for the model, depending on a few factors like quality, speed, and price. And in terms of quality, it's right up there with GPT-4o and Claude 3.5 Sonnet. You'll see here that they're both rated near 100%. And then for speed, the 8 billion parameter version is really fast. It's the fastest at this point. And the 405 billion parameter version is pretty slow. Then when we get into price per million tokens, that one's a bit tough to estimate, and you would have to do your own benchmarking, obviously, in your systems. But the most cost efficient, again, is this 8 billion parameter one, and you get it pretty expensive once you get into the Claude 3.5 Sonnet and the 405B and GPT-4o. But in terms of cost, it's right around there, and it's not too bad. You can get this on a bunch of different providers. Right now, it seems there is some providers that are doing a bit better in terms of cost performance. Together AI is pretty good if you want to go for speed. Together AI again is also doing pretty well here. And for pricing, input and output, you're gonna get the best bang for your buck probably on, let's see, you're probably gonna get your best bang for your buck on Fireworks. So there's a couple of providers here you can mix and match what you want. So what's a practical next step to take with Llama 3.1? Experiment with the 8 billion and 70 billion versions. The 405 version is going to be heavy, so you're going to have to download it and really take care of how you're moving it around. So I don't think it would be practical to self-host it. I say it would be more practical maybe to use the 70B version. And the tactic a lot of people are going to use is going to this cheap version when they want to do a large batch amount of work, and then going to the expensive version when they want a really high quality output. So understanding that play between routing the models and picking the correct one is also going to be pretty important as well. So if you are going into this with the idea of experimenting, a really good service that I always use and I've used multiple times on this channel is Modal. They have a guide, which I'll link in the description as well, where you can host any Llama 3 model with text generation inference. Now, this guide is not new. They didn't just release this, but it was used to host the last 70B version. So I'm assuming it'll work for this new 70B version with a couple of tweaks. So that's somewhere you can get started as well. And if you are running into any unique use cases or maybe some unique attributes of this model, feel free to drop them in the comments below. And also what you think about this model and how it's going to impact the open source world, your professional work, anything like that. Feel free to drop it in the comments below.